Right, today we're going to be talking about female fat loss considerations because let's face it, women are for Venus and men are from Mars. So there is some very big physiological and psychological differences that need to be considered in order to make that long-term progress that everybody's after. So before we get into things, let's have a look at some common problems. So problems that you might have come across or you might be thinking about right now. One big problem is that females compare their progress to males' progress. And once we go through all this, you'll understand why that isn't possible to do. And it's not a good thing to do. Bad news, fat loss is harder for women than it is for men. So that is a problem. We need to think about ways that we can get around this and make sure that we're maximizing the efficiency for fat loss in women. And again, like I touched on there, there's some psychological and there's some physiological reasons that we're going to get into. Nutrition and exercise goal setting can often just be set the same as what it is for males. That's a problem because there are differences that need to be considered. And we're going to get into these and how we can do that going forwards. And a big problem with females is that they have been driven into focusing on the scales, which doesn't tell the true picture of progress, especially when we get into the menstrual cycle for females. And overall, the big problem is there's a lack of understanding about the challenges that surround the menstrual cycle for females. So I can imagine that most people will have thought about or had at least one of those problems. And we're going to get into this now. So let's have a look at why it is harder for women to lose fat. First of all, the physiological reasons. Generally, men on a whole have a bigger frame and have more muscle mass. That is a generalization, but on a whole, that is true. So this means that if you have more muscle mass, you burn more calories. So generally, women burn less calories day to day than what men do due to that difference in muscle mass. Therefore, when adhering to a calorie deficit for fat loss, which everybody has to do, women generally need to eat way less. So that is why we have a massive importance on increasing muscle mass. So that makes it harder straight away that women have to have a lower calorie intake than what men do. Second of all, there's a natural resistance from females' physiques and body. Women carry the continued existence of the human race in their genetics, i.e. childbirth and childbearing. So higher levels of body fat are required for both of these things. And the menstrual cycle, which is what this is going to touch on mostly, which men don't have, females do. So we're going to go into this in way more detail coming up. But before we do that, we're going to have a look at some psychological impacts as well that are harder for women than it is for men. So there's more pressure of crash dieting and these quick weight loss fads that cause long-term body composition damage. And what I mean by body composition damage is your ratio of fat to muscle. So if you're constantly or have constantly gone in the vicious cycle of quick weight loss, gain, quick weight loss, gain, quick weight loss, gain. Over time, over years, you've probably damaged your lean muscle mass. So you've probably lost quite a lot of muscle mass and increased your overall body fat at the same time. So there's body composition damage done there. And a lot of that is from the pressures of crash dieting and quick weight losses, which females generally go towards immediately. Second of all, because you need to have that lower calorie level when trying to adhere to a calorie deficit, which we explained above, that is mentally harder to stick to because it's less already. So that's another challenge. And then also the marketing for the products of these fads and these crash diets are generally aimed at women. The marketing companies are very smart with how they use imaging and wording around trying to push women into these things. So there's some of the psychological factors. So moving on, it's important to understand the phases of the menstrual cycle for females. And just before I go on, I'm referring here, all this information is referring to pre-menopausal healthy women who aren't taking any birth control medication. Okay, so it's important to understand that because if you are menopausal or very unhealthy and you are taking birth control medication, these are gonna differ a lot more. Okay, so it's important to understand that before we go on. So the menstrual cycle, there's three main phases. the follicular phase, the ovulation phase, and the luteal phase. The follicular phase is around about day 1 to 14. Ovulation is around about day 14, but again, these can vary. Luteal phase is around from day 15 to day 28, and that is what completes a full menstrual cycle. When we're thinking about this menstrual cycle and those phases, there are two important hormones that you need to be aware of. There's a lot more going on, but only two that we're going to touch on, and these are estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen levels are highest in the follicular phase, so in that day 1 to day 14, and progesterone levels steadily increase from ovulation phase into luteal phase from day 15 into day 28, and they then become the highest. And estrogen is generally related to feeling good, feeling better, things are easier, less cravings, which we're going to get into. And progesterone levels are generally related to feeling more tired, lethargic, and having more cravings. So we're going to have a look at these different phases. And let's have a look at what this means in terms of the female fat loss progress. So the menstrual cycle and fat loss progress. The follicular phase, like we said, day 1 to day 14. Good times, woohoo. You can train hard, you're going to have more energy, and you're going to be able to progress more throughout your workouts in these couple of weeks. This is due to you having a higher pain tolerance, more endurance, not feeling as low energy and lethargic, and having a much higher power output. So also, it's easier to stick to your lower calorie goals and your higher protein intake goals because you have less cravings and less hunger during this phase. So follicular phase, make the most of it. At the ovulation phase at around about day 14, again, this can vary, female to female, but this is where you will be and you'll feel at your strongest for your workout progression. So try and nail some PBs around that time. But it's also important to understand that your cravings are probably going to be at the highest here as well. So in other trainings that we've done, we now understand that one of the main importances of protein is that protein is the most satiating food out of protein, carbs, and fats. So it's important to eat more protein to try and bring down those cravings as low as possible. So it's a good idea to increase your protein around the ovulation phase, around day 14. So the most important phase we're going to go into is the luteal phase. So this gets its own page. The luteal phase. Okay, so the luteal phase is day 15 to 28, and it is definitely the hardest part of the menstrual cycle for females, especially sort of 5 to 7 days before your period, so from day 22 to 28. During this time, you're going to have increased fatigue, increased tiredness, increased hunger and cravings. And from day 22 onwards, these are some considerations you should think about in terms of your training and your nutrition for fat loss, remember. So it's probably a good idea to reduce your overall training volume. And by training volume, I mean the frequency, so how many days you're training in those days, and the weights that you're using, and your overall intensity. So if you reduce the weights, you still train, but that's going to lower the intensity, and that's going to help you with your lower levels of fatigue and tiredness. We're not saying that during the luteal phase you completely stop. You just need to be smart about how you're training. So a good idea would be focusing on increasing the amount of lower intensity activity you do. So where you might have been doing 3 to 4 heavy weight workouts and a couple of HIIT workouts, you might reduce that to 1 or 2, but then really increase the amount of steps you're doing. So that's a lower level intensity activity, or throw a yoga and Pilates session in there. We're not saying completely stop. It's just being about smart and changing what you're doing. It's also a good idea to increase your calorie goal to somewhere between 1 to 300 calories extra per day during that phase. And the maximum that you can go to really is taking your calorie goal, your daily calorie goal, back to maintenance level. So remember, when you're looking to lose fat, you'll be in a calorie deficit goal. That'll be somewhere between 0 to 500 maximum off your maintenance. If you're at that 500 deficit goal, add in somewhere between 0 and 500, preferably somewhere between 1 and 300 extra calories per day. That's going to help with your hunger, cravings, and your fatigue. And it's important to think that females shouldn't be beating themselves up about this increased calorie intake during this time. it's going to be better in the long run. And everybody's here for making long-term progress, not another short-term quick fix that in a couple of months' time isn't going to have you going anywhere. So it's important both physically and mentally not to beat yourself up about this increased calorie intake. It's only going to be 5 to a maximum of 7 days where you're increasing that calorie figure to help you get through the luteal phase. And again, if you're only going back to maintenance level, you're not putting body fat on, you're just simply slowing down the rate of your fat loss. Okay? So how does this impact fat loss? I've touched on it a little bit there. A big thing you need to realize, females, you need to be patient. It's going to be slower progress than it is for men due to the fact that you're going to play around with your calorie intake and you're going to be playing around with how you're working out and how you're exercising. Think bigger, long-term picture. Remember, there's 3,500 calories. That is going to reduce 1 pound of fat. So it will take longer when you are playing around with those calorie goals and your training goals week to week. But trust the process. This is science and it works. Trust it and keep in your head long term. Don't get distracted by the weight on the scales. And we're going to go into this now. So the scales and your weight during the menstrual cycle for females, this is going to change massively. You can't compare your weight week to week as this will vary massively due to the fluctuations in your water retention levels. So from the follicular phase to ovulation phase to luteal phase, your water retention levels are going to change somewhere up to a potential 5 pounds. So if you were weighing yourself on week 1 against week 2, against week 3, against week 4, you could have lost body fat, but the scales are telling you that you've put 3 or 4 pounds on, and that's going to be demoralizing. So you're going to get frustrated and you're either going to go one of 2 ways. First of all, you'll give up and then reach for that quick fix again, or that fad, which we've just touched on, is doing you long-term damage in terms of body shape. Or number 2, you'll try and overtrain, do more and more and more, and try to get that weight off that you think's body fat. You'll burn out, feel pretty crap, and potentially give up an extra couple of weeks later. And you'll feel crap and you'll probably do more harm than good. So like I've touched on there, you need to trust the process and forget about the weight on the scales. So how can you weigh yourself? Yes, if you've got a lot of weight to lose, you still should be looking for a downward trend in your weight. So you need to pick a time of the month and stick to weighing yourself only at that time for comparisons. So what we'll call this is an anchor week. Pick one week that is the same time of each cycle to weigh yourself and compare yourself month to month. Or if you do want to weigh yourself weekly, you need to have 4 separate weight comparisons for the different stages of your cycle. And overall, yes, these should have a downward trend if you're looking to lose weight and lose body fat over long term. So this is month to month downward trend. Remember that week to week, there's going to be fluctuations, but month to month, there should be a downward trend. So number 1, you can either pick 1 week that you just weigh yourself every month and it's the same time of your cycle. Or number 2, you can weigh yourself every week, but you only compare February to March, March to April, etc. for those 4 different scales. So to wrap up and conclude there, your training and nutrition should change throughout your menstrual cycle depending on the time of month you're in. The luteal phase, day 15 to 28, and especially the latter stage when your progesterone levels are at the highest. Remember, progesterone linked to not feeling as good, estrogen linked to feeling better. These days require the most change to your goal setting. So in terms of your nutrition, your calorie goals, and also your workout goals. Don't underestimate your NEAT, your non-exercise activity calories burned, especially when you've reduced your workout volume during that latter stage of the luteal phase. Don't neglect that. We're not saying stop completely. You can still make fat loss progression just at a slower rate and in a more sensible, smarter plan for long term. And really important to understand and remember, fluctuations to your weight on the scales are going to happen during the full cycle. This doesn't mean it's an increase in body fat. Body weight consists of fat, muscle, and water. And the one that it's not shown when you jump on the scales is just body fat. It's mainly going to be your water retention levels. And finally, if you do want to measure your weight and compare your weight over a period of time. Pick an anchor week throughout your cycle, and this will be your only comparison for weight changes. So have a little think about what stands out for you most. If you've got any questions, please message a coach with any feedback. Have a great day, everyone.